I found a message written by me warning, "Don't trust your daughter." But I swear I never wrote it. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that felt stretched and thin, like time itself had slowed down. The house was still, filled only with the soft hum of an old ceiling fan and the distant sound of traffic outside. The parents had not planned to clean that day. It just happened. One drawer led to another, one memory tugging at the next. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. The notebook appeared while searching for a misplaced bill. It was old, its cover faded and corners bent. Dust clung to it as if it had not been touched in years. The parent paused, holding it carefully, feeling a strange pull toward it. There was nothing special about the notebook at first glance. No label. No date. Just a quiet object from another time. They sat down at the small dining table and opened it. Most pages were blank. Some held grocery lists, half-finished thoughts, reminders written in a rush. The handwriting was familiar in the way a mirror is familiar. Slanted slightly to the right. Heavy pressure on certain letters. The same way the parents still write today. As they flipped through the pages, something slipped out and landed softly on the table. A loose sheet of paper, folded once down the middle. The parent frowned. They did not remember ever tearing a page from this notebook. Slowly, they unfolded it. The words were short. Only 5 of them. Written in dark ink, pressed deep into the paper. Don't trust your daughter. The parent stared at the sentence. At first it made no sense. It felt like reading a line from a stranger's life. Their eyes traced each letter again and again, as if the meaning might change. But it didn't. The shock was not in the message itself. It was in the handwriting. It was theirs. Every curve, every pause between words, every uneven line. There was no doubt. This was not someone copying their writing. This was not a joke or a trick. The hand that wrote this message was the same hand now resting on the table. A slow chill spread through their chest. The parents shook their heads slightly, as if that might push the thought away. No, they whispered to the empty room. That's not possible. They had no memory of writing this. None at all. They tried to think back. Years ago. Months ago. During some stressful time maybe? But nothing came. Their mind was blank where this memory should have been. It felt like reaching for something in the dark and touching only air. The parent folded the paper again and unfolded it, checking the other side. Nothing else was written. No date. No explanation. Just that single warning. A laugh escaped their mouth, short and nervous. I must have forgotten, they said out loud, trying to sound calm. That's all. People forget things. But the laugh did not feel real, and neither did the words. They looked toward the hallway, where the daughter's bedroom door was half closed. The house creaked softly, settling the way old houses do. The sound made the parent flinch. Their daughter had always been a good child. Quiet when needed. Bright in her own way. There had been arguments, of course. Every family had them. Curfews, school issues, small lies that came with growing up. Nothing serious. Nothing that would lead to a message like this. The parents pressed their fingers against their temple, trying to calm the growing pressure in their head. Stress. That was the answer. They have been tired lately. Work had been heavy. Sleep came in pieces, not whole nights. The mind could play tricks when pushed too far. Still, they could not bring themselves to throw the paper away. They slipped it back into the notebook and closed it, holding it tightly for a moment. The cover felt colder than before. They placed it back in the drawer, pushing it behind other items, as if hiding it might make it disappear. For a few minutes, they stood there, staring at the closed drawer. Their reflection in the nearby window looked older somehow. More worn. The parent walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Their hands trembled slightly, causing a few drops to spill. They noticed it and frowned. Get a grip, they muttered. As they drank, Their eyes kept drifting toward the hallway again. The daughter's door remained still. No sound from inside. Probably on her phone, they thought. Or reading. Normal things. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. The parents tried to focus on simple tasks. Washing dishes. Wiping counters. Folding laundry. But the message echoed in their mind with every movement. Don't trust your daughter. It felt wrong even thinking about it. The idea pushed against everything they believed about their family. About themselves. Trust was the foundation of being a parent. Without it, what was left? At dinner, the daughter came out of her room. She greeted them like she always did. Her voice sounded the same. Her face looked the same. Nothing about her seemed unusual. The parents studied her without meaning to. The way she held her fork. The way she avoided eye contact when asked about school. The way she smiled when talking about something she liked. All normal. All familiar. Guilt washed over the parent. How could they even consider such a thought? How could they let a forgotten note shake years of love and care? They forced themselves to smile back and ask normal questions. The conversation stayed light. Weather. Homework. Plans for the weekend. The parents laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right times. But something had shifted. It was small, almost invisible, like a crack in glass that only showed at certain angles. The parents felt it inside their chest. A tightness that hadn't been there before. After dinner, the daughter returned to her room. The parents cleaned up alone. The sound of running water seemed louder than usual. The silence felt heavier. Later that night, lying in bed, the parent stared at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. The fan hummed above, steady and dull. They told themselves again that it meant nothing. That the note was a mistake. That memory was unreliable, especially under stress. They had read about that somewhere. The mind could block things out. Rewrite them. Still, a question kept pushing its way forward. If they did write it, why? And what had been serious enough to make them warn themselves? The parents turned onto their side, facing the wall. Their hearts beat a little faster than normal. The house was quiet. Too quiet. In the drawer down the hall, the notebook rested where it had been placed. Inside it, the folded paper waited, patient and silent. The parents closed their eyes, choosing denial over fear. For now. But unease lingered, thin and sharp, refusing to fade. Morning light crept into the room through the thin gap in the curtains. The parent woke with a heavy feeling, as if they had not rested at all. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then the memory returned. The note. They sat up slowly, heart beating a little faster than usual. The house was quiet again. From down the hall came the faint sound of movement, a door opening and closing. The daughter was awake. The parent rubbed their face and took a deep breath. Today, they told themselves, they would prove this was nothing. A mistake. A forgotten moment. Once they knew the truth, the fear would go away. After breakfast, when the daughter left for school, the parent wasted no time. They went straight to the drawer and pulled out the notebook. Their hands were steadier than the night before, but only just. They opened it and took out the folded paper. The words stared back at them, unchanged. Don't trust your daughter. This time, instead of panic, a strange focus settled in. The parent knew what they had to do. They went to the closet and pulled out an old box stored on the top shelf. It was heavier than they expected. Dust puffed into the air as they set it down. Inside were old journals, envelopes, birthday cards, and stacks of loose papers tied with string. They spread everything across the dining table. The first journal was from many years ago. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. The parent flipped through it slowly, scanning the writing. Grocery lists. Thoughts written late at night. Plans that never happened. They held the warning note next to the journal and compared them line by line. The slant matched. The way certain letters leaned forward, as if always in a hurry. The pressure where the pen dug deeper into the paper on emotional words. The uneven spacing between lines. The same spelling habits appeared too. A missing letter here. An extra space there. Small mistakes the parent had never bothered to fix. Their throat tightened. They moved on to another journal. Then another. Each time, the result was the same. The handwriting was not just similar. It was identical. They pulled out old mail next. Utility bills they had signed. School permission slips. Forms filled out in a rush. They laid them beside the note. Again, everything matched. The parent sat back in their chair, staring at the table full of evidence. A quiet dread settled over them. This was no trick. No forgery. No mistake. They picked up the warning note and rubbed the paper gently between their fingers. It felt different from new paper. Softer. Thinner. The edges were worn, not torn recently but aged over time. They held it up to the light. The ink had faded slightly, the way ink does after years, not days. There were tiny marks, faint creases, signs of being folded and unfolded long ago. Whoever wrote this did not write it yesterday. The parent swallowed hard. They searched the notebook more carefully now. Page by page. They checked the binding, the cover, the spaces between pages. Nothing else stood out. No dates. No clues. They looked at the bottom of the note again, hoping to see something they had missed. A smudge. A symbol. Anything. There was nothing. A strange thought crept in, slow and unwelcome. What if the problem wasn't the note? What if the problem was their memory? The parent closed their eyes, trying to think back to the years when the notebook had been used. That time of life felt blurred now. Busy days. Long nights. Stress that never fully went away. There had been moments they barely remembered. Conversations that felt distant. Arguments they recalled only in pieces. They had laughed those gaps off before. Everyone forgot things. Everyone lost track sometimes. But this was different. They stood and walked to the mirror near the hallway. Their reflection stared back, eyes tired, face lined. They searched their own expression for answers. Did I forget something that important? They asked quietly. The mirror gave no reply. Throughout the day, they found themselves checking other notes without thinking. Sticky notes on the fridge. Lists on their phone. Old calendars. Everything looked normal. Familiar. Yet doubt had taken root. They began to question small things. Had they locked the door earlier, or just thought they had? Had they already made that phone call, or planned to? Each doubt fed the next. When the daughter returned home, the parent watched her closely again. She seemed the same as always. Tired from school. Talking about something trivial. Laughing at a joke on her phone. The parent tried to see her differently, but nothing obvious appeared. No signs of danger. No hints of betrayal. That almost made it worse. If there was nothing wrong now, then something must have happened before. Later, when the daughter went to shower, the parent returned to the table. The papers were still spread out, silent witnesses. They gathered them slowly, stacking the journals neatly. As they lifted the bottom pile, something slipped out and fell to the floor. An old envelope. The parent froze. They picked it up carefully. Their name was written on the front, in the same handwriting. Inside was a single blank sheet. Nothing else. No message. No explanation. The emptiness of it felt louder than words. They slid the paper back into the envelope and placed it on the table beside the notebook. Their hands were cold now. That night, sleep came even harder than before. When it did arrive, it was thin and broken, filled with half-remembered dreams that vanished upon waking. The parent lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling once more. They no longer doubted the note was real. They doubted themselves. Somewhere in their past, a version of them had been scared enough to write that warning. Careful enough to hide it. desperate enough to leave it behind. And that version knew something this one did not. The thought settled heavy in their chest as the house slept around them. Whatever the truth was, it had not disappeared. It had only been forgotten. The next few days passed slowly, measured by routines and small observations. The parent moved through each morning with quiet attention, watching without meaning to. Every sound, every moment felt sharper than before. The daughter left the house early most days. She moved with purpose, backpack over one shoulder, keys always in the same pocket. She never forgot her phone. Never missed the bus. She waved goodbye every time, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a tired nod. Nothing about her suggested trouble. At breakfast, she helped clear the table without being asked. She asked how work was going. She listened, really listened, even when the parent complained about small things. When she spoke, her words were careful and polite. The parent caught themselves thinking the same thing over and over. This makes no sense. At work, the parent mentioned their daughter in passing conversations. Not the note. Never the note. Just normal talk. She's doing well, one coworker said. Always has her life together. Another added, you must be proud. Not many kids are that responsible these days. The parent nodded, forcing a smile. Proud. Yes. That was the word they had always used. Later, they called a relative they trusted, someone who had known the daughter since she was small. The conversation stayed casual at first. Weather. Health. Old memories. Then the parent asked, as lightly as they could, how do you think she's doing lately? There was no hesitation in the answer. She's wonderful, the relative said. Always kind. Always respectful. You raised her right. The call ended with warm words and laughter. When the line went silent, the parent sat there holding the phone, staring at nothing. Wonderful. They replayed moments from the daughter's life. School plays where she stood proudly on stage. Late nights helping with homework. Tears after small disappointments, followed by determination the next day. There were no dark memories hiding there. No sudden changes. No warning signs. If anything, she had grown into someone reliable. Someone people leaned on. One afternoon, a friend of the daughter stopped by. They talked in the living room while the parent pretended to read nearby. The friend laughed easily, spoke warmly. She's always there when you need her, the friend said. Even when she's busy. The daughter shrugged it off, embarrassed. It's nothing, she said. The parent watched her face closely. Her eyes were clear. Her voice steady. No cracks. Later that evening, while washing dishes, the parent felt a sharp wave of confusion. Why would I ever doubt her? The question felt heavy. It pressed against the evidence they had gathered. The handwriting. The aged paper. The certainty that the note was real. The contrast made everything worse. The parent began to feel foolish. Paranoid, even. They scolded themselves for letting one forgotten message shake their trust. That night, they stood outside the daughter's door, listening. Soft music played inside. A calm, familiar sound. Nothing secretive. Nothing strange. They walked away, shaking their head. In the days that followed, the parent noticed how others responded to the daughter. Teachers spoke highly of her. Neighbors praised her manners. Even strangers seemed to trust her easily. She held doors open. She offered help without being asked. She remembered birthdays. She was the last person anyone would suspect of anything. And yet, the note existed. The parent carried that thought like a weight in their pocket. Always there. Always felt. One evening, while sorting mail, the daughter mentioned an upcoming event she had volunteered for. She spoke with excitement, explaining how she wanted to help organize things, make them better. That's good of you, the parent said. The daughter smiled. I just like helping, she replied. The words sounded honest. The parent searched her face again, hoping for something, Anything that might explain the warning. A flicker of guilt. A moment of hesitation. There was none. After she went to bed, the parents sat alone in the living room. The lights were low. Shadows stretched across the walls. They thought about the person who had written the note. That version of themselves must have been certain, fearful enough to leave a message behind. But the person sitting here now saw only goodness. The tension between those two truths began to pull at the parents' thoughts. One side said trust your child. The other whispered that the warning existed for a reason. They wondered if love itself could blind a person, or if fear could distort memory. The parent tried to imagine a scenario where the note made sense. Each attempt failed. Every image felt forced, unreal. They sighed deeply and leaned back, closing their eyes. I'm overthinking this, they said to the empty room. Yet even as they said it, the unease did not leave. Because if the daughter was exactly who she appeared to be, then the danger did not lie in her behavior. It lay somewhere else. In a hidden moment. A forgotten truth. And that made the situation far more frightening. The parent realized something then, slowly and reluctantly. The warning was not accusing the daughter of being careless or rude or rebellious. It was accusing her of being trusted. The thought sent a chill through the parent's chest. They stood up and walked to the drawer once more. The notebook was still there. The note still folded inside. They did not open it this time. They already knew what it said. As they turned off the lights and headed to bed, one truth settled quietly into their mind. If everyone saw the daughter as perfect, and the note still existed, then whatever had happened had been carefully hidden. Not just from others, but from the parent themselves. The idea did not come all at once. It arrived slowly, like a shadow stretching longer as the light changed. The parent first noticed it while standing in the shower one morning, letting warm water run over their shoulders. A memory surfaced, then slipped away before it could fully form. They stood there longer than usual, eyes closed, trying to catch it. Something about that time. Years ago. The day passed with the same uneasy rhythm that had followed them since the discovery of the note. But now, the questions felt sharper, more focused. Not about the daughter. About themselves. That evening after dinner, the parents sat alone with a cup of tea that slowly went cold. They let their thoughts drift backward, past recent months, past last year, into a stretch of time they rarely visited. It had been a difficult period. They remembered being tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, but the deep exhaustion that settled into the bones. Days had blurred together back then. Mornings started too early. Nights never seemed long enough. Work had been overwhelming. Deadlines stacked on top of each other. Constant pressure to perform, to provide, to keep everything running smoothly. At the same time, something else had been happening. Something heavier. A family issue. The memory was vague, like looking through fog. There had been arguments. Raised voices. Long silences that felt worse than shouting. The parent remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, staring at nothing, mind racing. They tried to picture the house during that time. It looked the same, but it felt different. The parent rubbed their forehead, feeling a dull ache begin to form. Why was it so hard to remember clearly? They went to the bookshelf and pulled out an old calendar stored between two novels. It was from several years ago, pages marked with notes and reminders. They flipped through it slowly. Doctor appointments. Work deadlines. Dates circled more than once. Some days were completely blank. The parent paused on one month in particular. Their chest tightened as they studied it. There were fewer notes than usual. Large gaps of empty space. That wasn't like them. They had always written things down. Even small tasks. Especially during stressful times. They flipped to the next month. And the next. The same pattern appeared. Sparse notes. Missing details. It felt as if someone else had been living those weeks. The parent sat down slowly, calendar still in hand. A strange mix of fear and recognition washed over them. They remembered being sick during that time. Not seriously ill, but worn down. Constant headaches. Trouble sleeping. Moments of dizziness that came and went. They had brushed it off back then. Told themselves it was stress. Everyone was stressed. But now, looking back, it felt heavier. They tried to remember specific conversations from that period. A fight. A decision. Something important. Their mind offered only fragments. A raised voice. A slammed door. Tears they couldn't place. The parent pressed their fingers into their palms, grounding themselves in the present. The room felt suddenly too quiet. What if I wasn't always aware of what I was doing? The thought scared them more than the note ever had. They stood and walked slowly through the house, touching familiar objects. The couch. The counter. The wall by the stairs where a mark still showed from a moved piece of furniture. Had they really been here the whole time? In the bedroom, they opened a drawer they rarely used. Inside were old receipts, folded papers, forgotten items. They searched carefully, methodically. Nothing stood out. But the act of looking stirred something. They remembered coming home late one night during that difficult period. The house had been dark. Too dark. They recalled standing in the hallway, unsure why they felt uneasy. The memory cut off there. The parent sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly. It was possible. Uncomfortable, but possible. They could have written the note during a moment of clarity. A moment when something finally made sense. A moment strong enough to break through exhaustion and fear. And then forgotten it. The idea settled into place with disturbing ease. They thought about how the note had been hidden. Not destroyed. Not thrown away. Carefully tucked inside a notebook. Waiting. That wasn't the action of someone confused. That was deliberate. The parent imagined themselves during that time. Older than they were then, but younger than now. Sitting alone. Pen in hand. Heart racing. What had pushed them to that point? They stood and paced the room, steps slow and measured. Each movement felt heavy. Memory loss wasn't always dramatic. They knew that. It didn't mean forgetting who you were or where you lived. Sometimes it was just holes. Missing hours. Missing days. Missing reasons. The parent leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Had they protected themselves by forgetting? The thought made their stomach twist. That night, they dreamed of the past. Not clearly, but in flashes. Hallways without doors. Pages without words. A voice calling their name from somewhere far away. They woke before dawn, heart pounding. In the dim light, the house felt unfamiliar. They lay still, listening to the soft sounds of breathing from down the hall. The daughter was home. Safe. As far as they knew. The parents sat up slowly, rubbing their arms as if cold. The missing memories no longer felt like a small detail. They felt like a warning of their own. Throughout the next day, the parent paid closer attention to themselves than to anyone else. They noticed moments of distraction. Times when their thoughts drifted without warning. It frightened them. At lunch, they stared at their phone, rereading old messages. Most were ordinary. A few from that stressful period felt distant, written by someone else. They did not remember sending them. The realization hit hard. They were not imagining the gaps. They existed. By evening, the weight of it all pressed down on them. They sat alone once more, the notebook open on the table in front of them. They unfolded the note again. For the first time, they did not feel disbelief. They felt recognition. Not of the moment it was written, but of the person who wrote it. Someone exhausted. Someone afraid. Someone trying to hold on to truth before it slipped away. The parent folded the paper carefully and placed it back where it belonged. They leaned back in their chair, staring at the ceiling. If they had written that note during a moment of clarity, then the message mattered. And if they had forgotten why, Then uncovering that reason would not be easy. The past had not disappeared. It had simply gone quiet. And now, piece by piece, it was beginning to speak again. The changes did not announce themselves. They appeared quietly, tucked into ordinary moments. At first, the parent brushed them aside, the way people do with things that feel uncomfortable but harmless. It started with a bank notification. The parent sat at the kitchen table one afternoon, checking messages on their phone. Among the usual alerts was one from the bank. A routine message. Nothing urgent. They opened it without concern. A transfer. Not large. Not small either. Enough to notice. The parent frowned and opened their banking app. The transaction had been made months ago, during that difficult period they now thought about often. The note beside it was brief and familiar. House expenses. They stared at the screen, trying to remember. They could not. At first, they assumed the memory would come if they waited. They set the phone down and went about their day. Made tea. Wiped the counter. Looked out the window. The memory never arrived. Later that evening, they mentioned it casually. "Do you remember when we moved some money around last year?" the parent asked, keeping their voice light. The daughter didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said. "You were stressed about bills. We talked about it at the table. You said it made sense at the time." She spoke calmly, confidently. The parent nodded, pretending recognition. But inside, something tightened. They searched their mind again. The kitchen table. A conversation. A decision. Nothing. The parent told themselves it was fine. People forgot financial details all the time. Stress erased things. That didn't mean anything was wrong. Still that night, they checked their account history more carefully. There were other things. A payment they didn't fully remember approving. A document uploaded and signed digitally. The signature was theirs. Every curve. Every pause. That familiar pressure again. The parent leaned back in their chair, heart beating slowly but firmly. This wasn't panic. It was something colder. They searched the house the next day, not frantically, but with quiet purpose. Old folders. File drawers. The shelf where important papers were kept. They found a stack of documents clipped together. Insurance forms. Agreements. All signed during that same forgotten stretch of time. The dates stood out now, impossible to ignore. They sat on the floor, papers spread around them, feeling as though they were piecing together a life lived by someone else. None of the documents were alarming on their own. Everything was legal, practical, sensible. But the parent did not remember making any of these choices. Later that day, while folding laundry, the daughter mentioned something in passing. "Remember when we talked about switching providers?" she said. The parent froze, a towel half folded in their hands. "I don't think we did," they replied carefully. The daughter looked up, surprised. "We did. You were exhausted that week. You asked me to remind you, but then you handled it yourself." Her tone was gentle, matter of fact. The parent forced a small smile. "Right," they said. Inside, doubt spread quietly, like water seeping through cracks. The conversations continued like that over the following weeks. Small references to talks the parent couldn't place. Decisions already made. Plans already discussed. Each time, the daughter spoke with certainty. Not defensive. Not nervous. Just sure. The parent began to notice how easily they agreed, how quickly they moved on. It was easier than admitting the truth. "I don't remember." Saying those words felt like exposing something fragile. One evening, the parent pulled out an old email account they rarely used anymore. They searched by date, scrolling through messages from that stressful period. There were long threads. Detailed replies. Clear instructions. They read messages they had no memory of writing. The tone was calm. Organized. Focused. Not the voice of someone confused. That scared them. They closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room for a long time, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. If they had been functioning so well, making decisions, handling responsibilities, then where had their awareness gone? The daughter sat beside them later, watching television. She leaned comfortably against the armrest, relaxed. The parent watched her out of the corner of their eye. She looked safe, familiar. And yet, the space between what the parent remembered and what the daughter described continued to grow. One night, the parent gathered the courage to say it. "I feel like I lost time," they said softly. The daughter turned to them, concern on her face. "You were under a lot of pressure back then," she said. "Anyone would struggle to remember." Her answer was reasonable. Too reasonable. The parent nodded, letting the conversation end there. But later, alone in their room, they stared at the ceiling, the same way they had so many nights before. The pattern was clear now. During that period, the parent had acted, decided, signed, spoken, and then forgotten. The doubt was no longer about whether the note was real. It was about whether the parent had been fully present when those choices were made. They wondered if the daughter had noticed at the time, if she had adapted, if she had stepped in to help, or if she had simply followed instructions given by a version of the parent who no longer existed. None of these thoughts accused her of wrongdoing, but they changed how the parent saw everything. Trust began to feel complicated. That night, the parent returned to the notebook once more. They opened it slowly, almost carefully. They unfolded the note. The words felt heavier now, shaped by everything they had learned. "Don't trust your daughter." The parent exhaled slowly. Perhaps it did not mean the daughter was dangerous. Perhaps it meant something else. Perhaps it was a reminder to be careful when memory failed, to question even the most familiar voices, to protect oneself when clarity slipped away. The doubt did not explode into fear. It settled, quiet, persistent. And for the first time, the parent accepted that not knowing might be more dangerous than believing. The inconsistencies were small, but they were real. And they were no longer ignorable. The parent waited for the right moment. Not because they were planning anything dramatic, but because timing mattered. A wrong tone, a careless word, and the fragile balance in the house could shift. The moment came on an ordinary evening. Dinner was finished. Dishes were drying on the rack. The television murmured quietly in the background. The daughter sat across from the parent, scrolling through her phone, relaxed and unguarded. The parent took a slow breath. "Do you ever think about that rough time a few years ago?" they asked, keeping their voice even. The daughter looked up without surprise. "Sometimes," she said. "Why?" "No reason," the parent replied. "I just feel like parts of it are fuzzy for me." The daughter nodded immediately. "That makes sense. You were under a lot of pressure then." The answer came smoothly. Too smoothly. The parent tilted their head slightly. "Do you remember how things were between us back then?" The daughter thought for a second, just long enough to seem natural. "You were tired," she said. "But you always tried your best. You worried a lot about doing the right thing." The words were gentle, supportive. The parent felt a strange discomfort settle in their chest. "That's how you remember it?" they asked. "Yes," the daughter said. "We talked a lot. You leaned on me sometimes. I didn't mind." The parent nodded slowly. "Leaned on me." They had heard that phrase before. From the daughter. From others. They tried again, carefully. "Were there ever times when you felt like I wasn't fully there?" The daughter frowned slightly, concern softening her face. "You were exhausted," she said. "But you were still you. You trusted me." The parent noticed how often that word came up. Trusted. They shifted in their chair. "Do you remember me ever saying something strange? Or worrying about things that didn't make sense?" The daughter smiled gently. "You worried like any parent does. Nothing unusual." No hesitation. No confusion. The parent felt as though they were listening to a well-rehearsed summary rather than a memory. They decided to change direction. I found some old documents recently, the parent said. Things I signed that I don't remember. The daughter's expression stayed calm. You handled a lot on your own back then, she said. I remember being impressed. Impressed. The parent studied her face. There was no flicker of fear. No defensive reaction. Just reassurance, offered freely. Too freely. Did I ever ask you to keep track of things for me? The parent asked. The daughter nodded. Sometimes. You trusted my judgment. Again. The parent swallowed. And you were okay with that? Of course, she said. I wanted to help. The conversation felt like walking on smooth ice. Every step was careful. Controlled. The parent tried one last question. Do you remember me writing things down? Notes to myself. The daughter paused this time. Just a pause. Then she smiled. You wrote notes all the time, she said. It helped you stay organized. The parent forced a small laugh. Guess it worked. The daughter laughed too, matching the tone perfectly. That was when the parent knew. Not that the daughter was lying, but that she was choosing her words. Every answer felt polished, as if shaped to calm rather than reveal. As if the goal was reassurance, not truth. After the conversation ended, the daughter returned to her phone, interest already shifting elsewhere. The parent sat still, staring at the darkened television screen. They replayed the exchange in their mind. The timing. The phrasing. The confidence. Nothing the daughter had said was wrong. But none of it felt spontaneous. Later that night, as the house settled into silence, the parent lay awake again. The familiar position. The same ceiling. They wondered if the daughter had learned, during that forgotten time, how to speak carefully. How to guide conversations away from danger. Or if the parent was simply seeing patterns where none existed. That was the worst part. They could no longer trust their instincts. The notebook waited in the drawer down the hall. The note inside felt heavier with each passing day. The parent turned onto their side, facing the wall. They had confronted the daughter without accusing her. And now, instead of clarity, they felt something colder. Distance. Not built from anger or fear, but from uncertainty. The parent understood then that asking direct questions would not bring answers. If the truth existed, it was buried in that lost stretch of time. And uncovering it would require more than conversation. It would require remembering. Whether they were ready to or not. The breakthrough came by accident, the way most truths do. The parent had not been searching for anything specific that night. They were simply trying to quiet their mind. The house was asleep, wrapped in the familiar stillness of late hours. The parent sat at the dining table with a laptop open, scrolling through old folders they had avoided for years. One folder caught their eye. Archived. They hesitated before clicking it. Something about the name made their chest feel tight. Inside were dozens of files. Old work documents. Scanned papers. Forgotten attachments. Most meant nothing now. Then they saw an email chain. The date stopped them. It was from the same period as the note. Their hand hovered over the mouse. For a moment, they considered closing everything and going to bed. Ignorance had become familiar. Almost comforting. But they clicked. The email was sent from their own account, addressed to themselves. The subject line was plain. Reminder. The parent frowned and opened it. The message was longer than expected. Written carefully. Slowly. The tone was different from their usual emails. More personal. More deliberate. They began to read. At first, it spoke about exhaustion. About fear of forgetting important things. About feeling unsure of their own judgment during that time. Then the message shifted. The parents' breathing slowed as their eyes moved across the screen. They had written about noticing changes. Not dramatic ones. Small ones. Moments when the daughter seemed to know things before being told. Moments when she guided decisions instead of waiting for them. Times when she spoke for the parent, corrected them gently, or reminded them of choices already made. At the time, the parent had told themselves it was helpful, supportive. But the email continued. They had begun to feel uneasy. Not because the daughter was cruel or careless, but because she was always prepared, always calm, always one step ahead. The parent read the words twice, then a third time. They had written about a conversation they now only vaguely remembered. A moment when the daughter had spoken firmly, insisting something had already been decided. The parent had doubted themselves. Again. That was when fear had taken root. Further down the email, the writing grew more urgent. The parent had admitted they were afraid to confront her. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of damaging their relationship. Afraid that their own fragile state would be used against them. They had written about the possibility that the daughter believed she was helping. Or that she believed she knew better. Or that she simply grew accustomed to being trusted without question. The parent swallowed hard. The email ended with a line that made their hands tremble. If I forget this, I need to remember one thing. Trust must be earned again, not assumed. The parent leaned back slowly, heart pounding. They closed the laptop and sat in silence, letting the meaning settle. This was the context. Not proof of wrongdoing. Not evidence of harm. But proof of fear. They stood and went to the drawer where the notebook rested. With careful hands, they took it out and unfolded the note once more. Don't trust your daughter. For the first time, the message felt complete. It was not hatred. Not anger. It was caution. A warning written by someone who had realized something was wrong but did not know how to stop it. The parent remembered now. Not clearly, but enough. They remembered feeling small during that time. Vulnerable. Dependent. And they remembered realizing slowly that trust given too easily could change the balance between parent and child. They had written the note because emails could be deleted. Memories could fade. But handwriting felt permanent. Human. They had hoped that one day, a clearer version of themselves would find it. That day had come. The parent sat at the table until morning light crept in through the window. They did not feel angry. They felt sad. Sad that fear had been necessary. Sad that silence had felt safer than honesty. From the hallway came soft footsteps. The daughter was awake. The parent closed the notebook gently. They now understood why the note existed. And they understood something else. The note was not asking them to accuse. It was asking them to see. To slow down. To stop assuming. The truth they had preserved was not about the daughter being bad. It was about the parent realizing they had lost control of their own voice. And promising themselves they would not let that happen again. The context was finally clear. What remained was the hardest part. Deciding what to do with it. Nothing changed all at once. That was the first thing the parent noticed. The house still sounded the same in the mornings. The daughter still moved through her routine with ease. Breakfast still happened at the same table. Conversations still stayed polite and light. From the outside, everything looked normal. But inside the parent, something had shifted. They no longer rushed decisions. When papers needed signing, they read every line. When emails arrived, they took their time responding. They stopped agreeing automatically, stopped nodding just to keep things smooth. They opened a new account and moved their finances carefully, quietly. Not in secret, but with intention. They updated passwords, organized files, made copies of important documents and stored them somewhere safe. It felt strange at first. Like stepping back into their own life after standing on the edge for too long. The daughter noticed the changes, of course. You're being extra careful lately, she said one evening, her tone curious, not unkind. The parent smiled lightly. I should have been all along. The answer was true. They began setting small boundaries. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confrontational. Just gentle lines drawn where none had existed before. "I'll handle that," the parent would say. "Let me think about it," they would add. Sometimes the daughter paused at those moments. Just for a second. Then she nodded and moved on. The parent watched carefully. Not with suspicion. With awareness. Days passed. Then weeks. The parent felt steadier. More present. The fog that once hovered at the edges of their thoughts began to lift, slowly. Memory returned in pieces, not all at once, but enough. They remembered what it felt like to doubt themselves. They remembered how easy it had been to hand responsibility over when exhaustion made thinking feel heavy. And they remembered why they had written the note. Not because the daughter was dangerous, but because silence had been. One night, the parent took the notebook out again. They sat alone at the table, the house quiet around them. They unfolded the paper one last time. "Don't trust your daughter." The words no longer felt sharp. They felt steady. The parent understood now that trust was not something to give away without thought. Even love needed boundaries. Especially love. The note had not been written to start a fight. It had not been meant to accuse or expose. It had been written to survive forgetting. A message passed from one version of the parent to another. A reminder to stay awake. The next morning, the parent placed the note back in the notebook, then slid the notebook into a safer place. Not hidden. Not buried. Preserved. At breakfast, the daughter talked about her plans for the day. The parent listened, really listened. Not searching for meaning, not waiting for mistakes. Just listening. They responded calmly. Asked questions. Offered support where it was appropriate. The relationship continued. Changed, but not broken. That was the quiet truth the parent came to accept. Some warnings are not meant to be shouted. Some truths are not meant to be revealed all at once. Some messages exist only to keep awareness alive. As the parent washed their cup and looked out the window, they felt something close to peace. Not comfort. Not certainty. But clarity. They would live with the warning. Not in fear. But in control. Because the message had done what it was meant to do. It had kept the truth alive. And sometimes that was enough.